Again, on behalf of Father Mark and all of the community here at St. Joseph's, I'd like to welcome all of you to our annual Blue Mass. First of all, many of you may be wondering why we still have our Christmas trees up. And if you're not Catholic, that's a very good question. And Catholics don't even know that Christmas lasts for 3 weeks after December 25th in the Catholic liturgical calendar. So tomorrow will be the last day of Christmastide, and the trees will come down. But in the last moment here of the Christmas season, even though we've been celebrating it for since probably October 10th or something, we really don't start in the Catholic Church technically until December 24th, Christmas Eve Mass. It certainly helps us with getting out those late Christmas cards, and we get great deals on Christmas presents after Christmas is over. The Blue Mass. What is a Blue Mass? Some of you may be asking. Well, for Catholics, the highest prayer one can offer is the commemoration of Christ's Last Supper and sacrificial passion on Calvary. We call that the Mass. Some Masses are offered for a particular professional calling and color-coded, so to speak, in accord with the attire of that profession. So the so-called White Mass is offered for doctors and nurses. The Red Mass for attorneys and judges. English magistrates in the Middle Ages wore red robes. So the Red Mass for attorneys and judges, and the Blue Mass for police, fire, and emergency personnel. We call you first responders. Generally, you wear blue. Most of you are wearing blue today. And so, I know the sheriffs on duty wear green, but most understand blue to be police and fire. We live in a more threatening world today than in previous generations, perhaps, and so we offer this prayerful Mass each year for those who put your lives on the line for all of us, and in gratitude for your service. We welcome the dignitaries, our mayor today, as well as our chief of police, and representatives from the Congressman's office and the Sheriff's Department, and many others, the Fire Department, the Stanislaus Consolidated Fire. And all of you who have come to pray to God for protection and in gratitude for His blessing upon us this past year and in the year to come. Our secure and peaceful social order changed irrevocably on September 11th, 2001. 4 months after those attacks in New York and Washington, St. Joseph's held our first annual Blue Mass. And by the grace of God, we continue to offer this Mass every year since then. It was in that year, in that time, just after 9/11, that we Americans realized how critically we all depend on our first responders, and to what degree of heroism these men and women are prepared to sacrifice their lives. On that day, September 11th, all of America watched as columns of blue-clad police and firefighters raced up the stairwells of those burning towers of the World Trade Center, knowing full well that they were entering their own tombs. They were doing so in order to save the lives of people they had never met. The Catholic Mass has 2 parts, and I'm going to reflect now on the Scriptures in its connection with this phenomenon of what we saw on 9/11 and what we see day by day, week by week in the police, fire, and emergency departments of our country. And so the first of the readings we had from the Bible was from the Old Testament, from the book of Genesis, what's called the binding of Isaac, or the sacrifice of Isaac. It's a pivotal story in the Jewish faith. The sacrifice of Isaac. Abraham, the great patriarch of the Jewish people, followed God into the desert to establish a new people. I will make your descendants as numerous as the sands on the shores of the sea, God told Abraham. For 80 years, Abraham waited for the fulfillment of his promise. He waited for a son to be born to him to begin this great race. And no son was coming for many, many years. And then finally, Isaac was born of Abraham's wife, Sarah. And so finally he has the proof, the fulfillment of that promise, and God then instructs Abraham, take Isaac, your only son, your beloved son, and sacrifice him on a mountain that I will show you. Isaac is probably about 18 years old in the story, ready to get married and begin having children. He's just at that moment of fulfilling the promise. Abram is just ready to see all of his dreams come true when God says, now sacrifice him. Abraham doesn't hesitate. He takes the knife and his son and heads up the hill. We know that God's angel stopped Abraham's hand before he could drive the knife into his son's throat. For God had seen Abraham's willingness to sacrifice what he held most precious in this, more than his very life, his son of the promise. He completely trusted in God. On 9/11, we Americans stood amazed to see those columns of police and fire personnel streaming into the burning trade towers, rushing to save their fellow citizens, ready to sacrifice what every man and woman holds most precious, their very lives. It had not even occurred to the average taxpayer watching TV that morning that hundreds of New York police and firefighters would not hesitate to die for people that they had never met. It just had not occurred to us until we saw this with our very eyes. The sacrifice implicit in the calling to be a first responder. How can a man overcome the natural instinct to preserve his own life? I think it comes down to faith in God. God who promises another life for those who are willing to trust him. My life, O God, is in your hands, as we heard in the psalm today. Our Stanislaus County emergency personnel risk their lives and effectively lay down their lives for those they do not know. And how do they do this? How do you do this? I think it can only be explained by faith in God. In someone who watches over your lives on earth and promises you a life after this one. Should you lose your life on earth, should it be compromised by grave illness or injury, God has another life for us. Those who lay down their lives, ultimately, whether we think about it consciously or not, lay down their lives for the love of others and the love of God, who watches over all of us. For Christians, the story of Father Abraham and his son Isaac foretells the greatest story ever told, the day when God the Father sacrificed his only son, his beloved one, on the altar of the cross. Only at Calvary do we fully understand what sacrifice means. But at Calvary, unlike on Mount Moriah, where Abraham was ready to cut his own son's throat, no angel stayed the hand of sacrifice. Jesus, like Isaac, trusted his Father, even unto offering his life, but God raised him from the dead. Jesus gave his life for others, and And God honored that sacrifice, that trust in him, by raising him up after he had died. It is this sacrifice and this resurrection that we celebrate at this Blue Mass. No greater love has any man than to lay down his life for his friends, Jesus tells his disciples. He tells them this just before he goes to his own death. This I command you, love one another. When police or fire commanders order their men into a burning building, or to respond in the middle of the night to a home invasion, they are effectively commanding them to lay down their lives for the innocent. One puts one's life on the line not just as a job, but as an act of trust in God, act of trust in someone greater and for love of neighbor. Jesus commands us, love one another. And you do that not just in your heads, like a lot of us, but you do that with your lives, with your bodies. The first responders of Stanislaus County, whether they be followers of Jesus Christ, Christians or not, fulfill the commandments of the Lord. They do so in more immediate and compelling ways than most of us who hope to be good Christians. We have much to learn from all of you, and much for which we must pray for you. May God protect his chosen ones and bless those who have made a commitment to protect his children with their lives.